the parallel sessions. So you will all bear with me that during the parallel sessions, we all were in different rooms and we're not aware of what was happening in other sessions. Today, we have reporters who will be coming up here to share with you summaries of what happened in these sessions so we all can leverage on that knowledge. To chair this session is Professor Ananjise William Ande Lazaro. He is the AAU board member, East Africa, and Vice Chancellor for University of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Put your hands together for Professor Ananjise William Ande Lazaro. And I will also be kind to put your hands together. Keep it up until he gets here, please. He is a very enthusiastic professor. We can do it better for him, please. Come on. Thank you, Prof. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first session of the final day of our exciting conference, which began on Monday. And in this session, we will conclude our discussions. We will reflect on key takeovers and look forward to future opportunities. Let us make most of the session together. With this, a few remarks, I would like to straight away go to our reporters. The first one is Mohamed Issa. Mohamed Issa. The second one is Dr. Felicia Nkrumah. The third one is Mrs. Adelina Adi. And the third one is Mr. Frank. Mr. Frank Asefwa. Yeah, the session promises to be very engaging and informative, just as the previous ones. So, guys, you can see it. We'll start with the Mohamed Issa for some few minutes. Mohamed Issa, please.
Good morning. Dear distinguished Chancellor, Professor, delegates, and esteemed higher education stakeholders. It's a pleasure for me to present the repertoire report summarizing 3 critical sessions from the AAU 16th General Conference. Policy and Governance in Higher Education, which is session 2A. AI and tech-based learning, which is session 2B, and higher education's contribution to the SDGs, which is session 4A. So let's dive in the key insights. These sessions spanned critical themes in higher education transformation. Session 2A, chaired by Prof. Bulengo Lenkabla, addressed the governance and advocacy. Session 2B, led by UNESCO's Dr. Prohan Chakrun, and explored AI and immersive technology in teaching. Finally, session 4A, moderated by Dr. Mikinzi Longa, and focused on how universities can drive the Sustainable Development Goals. All these sessions took place on July 23rd. For session 2A, tackled the governance reforms for inclusive higher education. Dr. Tsumo highlighted Chinese centralized teacher education model as a potential benchmark for Africa, emphasizing national policy support paired with the local innovation. Professor Mulay Al-Hassan however, credited Africa's fragmented governance, citing over centralization and weak regional coordination, and a powerful call to action came from Professor Sally Boba, who argued inclusive funding policies for independent researchers, often marginalized in the current system. Key takeaway. First, African lab policy framework are needed to replace important standard. Second, partnership like Ghana-China Student Mobility Program reveal troubling inequities in practice. And third, the digital platforms could bridge gaps in policy dialogues. Moving to session 2B, which is balancing the AI's promise with its perils. Dr. Abdul Karim Oludi showcased AI's role in the personalized learning, but warned of cheating risks, citing AI-generated essays. His solution is stricter policies, detection tools, and redesigned assessment like oral exams. Meanwhile, Professor Nisreen Raouf demonstrated how VR and haptic simulators like those used in dental training reduces material waste and patient risk, but upfront costs remain prohibitive. The consensus of this session is Pan-African collaboration is critical. Imagine a serious games library where institutions share the VR modules or local production hub cutting costs. As one speaker struckly put, AI will replace you if you don't use it, but misuse undermines learning. Moving to session 4A. Session 4A underscored the university's pivotal role in achieving the SDGs. Dr. Gareth Duby shared South Africa case study on green campuses and gender entrepreneurship, and with Dr. Abdul Haq Azad revealed a stark statistics on 17%. Only 17% of the SDGs targets are on track. He argued African institutions to lead post-2030 realignment. The session standout moment came out from Professor Van Der, who demanded a curriculum decolonization, asking how can we claim inclusively when our syllabi erase African knowledge system? And this is important. Three priorities emerged. Number one is embed SDG into curricula. Number two is amplifying African voices in global framework. And finally, addresses the funding gaps, flying progress. Across all these sessions, three themes recurred. First, funding gaps, whether for SDG projects, governance reform, or EdTech. Second, the decolonization imperative from curricula to research inclusion. Number three, in equitable partnership where power imbalances persist. Yet we also saw trends. Africa-led SDG framework post-2030 and localized EdTech solution to cut out. The challenges are stark. Structural barriers like funding shortage and policy fragmentation, ethical risks such AI-enabled cheating and representing gaps where African perspectives are sidelined in global agenda. As Prof. Van Der noted, Agenda 2063 is ours, but are we shaping it? To conclude, here are actionable steps for universities. Integrated SDG and hybrid EdTech models. For policymakers, democratize governance and foster inter-Africa collaboration. For all stakeholders, develop AI safeguard and equitable partnership. The time for the talk is over, and let's move to the implementation. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mohamed Issa. Let's move to Dr. Felicia.
Thank you very much. Good day to you, distinguished executives. I will be reporting on the summaries from sessions 2C, 2D, and then 4B. Session 2D focused on the theme Collaborative Research and Capacity Building. The chairperson was Dr. A.G.E.N.D.A, who is the president of the Board of Directors, Higher Education Regulatory Agency in Cape Verde. And then parallel session 4B focused on women's contribution to higher education in Africa, in terms of how women are driving change for innovation at their institutional level. And this was chaired by Professor Sunangurai Domenica Chingarandi, who is the Vice Chancellor for Women's University of Africa in Zimbabwe. And finally, I would also be reporting on session 2C, which falls under subtheme 5. And the focus over here was on climate change, green energy, and blue economy. And this was also chaired by Professor Fatima Drouch, an associate professor here at UM6B. Focusing on session 2D now, the key objective was really to showcase successful models of collaborative research and how capacity building initiatives are panning out across the higher education institutions. It also highlighted interdisciplinary partnerships and institutional networks, as far as went on further to discuss how key successful initiatives can be scaled up. We received 4 presentations out of the 5 that were originally earmarked to be presented. The first presentation was on advancing astronomy for development in Africa, and this was done by Yusuf Moulin. The second presentation focused on collaborative research and capacity building, with a focus on the Matarike Network and University of Western Cape, the specific engagements that exist among a network of institutions. And this was by Umesh Bawa. Then at the session, we received a third presentation focusing on evidencing research capacity through comparative data on university research infrastructure. And this was done by the Association of Commonwealth Universities representative, William Branwell. And then finally, we received a fourth presentation focused on strengthening Moroccan representation in African initiatives. In terms of the key highlights from the session, following the various presentations and discussions, the session identified that strategic partnerships are critical to advancing Africa's research capabilities. And therefore, it's important that as higher education institutions, we invest deliberate efforts in ensuring that we are building mutually beneficial partners from the continent and beyond. The discussions also highlighted the fact that it's important to mitigate research assessment differences. There was a discussion around how such differences tend to either not promote collaboration in a way that is expected, and a discussion for people to share what initiatives they have been undertaking at their institutional level. And key amongst the points that were highlighted relates to the fact that at the start of a partnership, there has to be proactive measures to ensure that there is an alignment of partner expectations even before such partnerships are entered into. The issue of also prioritizing flexibility and making sure that we have flexible evaluation frameworks that all partners have agreed upon was also mentioned. Then also the need to scale successful initiatives came up strongly at that panel discussion. Over here at session 4B, which focused on women's contribution to higher education in Africa, this was a very power-packed session. It featured a panel discussion and then presentations. The panelists were Dr. Sinikwi Kwatizu, who is the registrar of Great Zimbabwe University. The session was also honored to have Professor Elizabetha Smaranda Olorinde, who is the AAU's who is an AAU board member, featuring as one of the panel members. And it featured 2 presentations, one from Mrs. Alice Umaji from Russia. She's with the Subsoil Africa Consortium, as well as one from Dr. Felicia Nkrumah Kwagbeji, who represented the African Women in Higher Education Network. This is a network hosted by the AAU Secretariat and mainly focusing on championing issues around gender and around women empowerment. As far as the key highlights from the session are concerned, the session promoted and highlighted the need that women have specific issues that in our planning as higher education institutions, in rolling out of our various policies, in the rolling out of our various activities, we need to ensure that they are gender sensitive. We need to ensure that they are promoting a conducive environment that would foster the advancement of women. For instance, if you are giving out a scholarship, do you consider the fact that a woman who is taking up the scholarship could be pregnant or could be somebody who has freshly delivered a baby and therefore would have to, in your accommodation provision, you would have to ensure that she should be able to have somebody else stay with her and take care of the baby while she focuses on her studies. And where you are giving out scholarships, you should also consider the age, cutoff for women, for instance, because some of them would have focused on attending to, our natural duties as women. And by the time she's ready to do her PhD, she's already past her 40 years. Meanwhile, the cutoff point is around 30 or 32. So those are some of the discussions we're having in that session. We also promoted the need for us to address systemic barriers in the system, and mentorship and support programs were identified as a key way to ensure that women can equally advance in their career. Moving on to session 2C, which was focused on climate change, green energy, and blue economy. And the objective for that session was really to explore the contribution of higher education institutions to the advancement of green technology, particularly in the context of climate change mitigation and sustainable development. We had one speaker, if I'm correct, and this was Sinikiwe Kwatizo. And the presentation was focused on the role of higher education in green technology, as well as taking a look at global perspective. As key highlights, the session identified and discussed that, of course, climate change is a multidisciplinary approach. It affects all of us, and therefore, we need to, in our various programs, ensure that there are aspects of our sessions focused on this area. As far as universities' role is concerned, the session indicated that higher education institutions are really crucial in climate change mitigation, and therefore in our research, in our teaching, and in the various innovations that we come up with, we should ensure we are driving green technology adoption. The session also came up with some key recommendations, and these were focused around capacity strengthening, around strengthening collaborations between academia, industry, and then government, as well as the private sector, and also the need for expansion of community-based education on climate resilience, agricultural practices, and energy use. In terms of the cross-cutting themes and issues identified across all three presentations, the issue of collaboration and partnership stood out strongly. All three presentations highlighted the importance of partnerships. That is, whether it's between academia and industry, whether it's between the North-South collaboration, or whether it's between male engagement, as well as promoting women's empowerment. The topic of capacity building and support also came strongly, as well as the need for systemic and structural change, run through all three presentations. There were some emerging trends identified as well, mainly around sustainability and climate action, and then also around innovation and technology transfer. Across the three presentations as well, the key challenges that were raised related to limited resources and funding. One of the presentations around astronomy really highlighted how it's an under-researched and an under-prioritized area on the continent, and the need for funding for various equipment and various human capacity in that area. Similarly, the issue of systemic and structural barriers stood out as a key challenge across all three themes that we focused on. Again, collaboration and partnership gaps. The presentations emphasized the need for stronger collaboration between academia and industry and government so that we are not working in silos to ensure that society benefits the most from higher education. Skills gap and capacity building was equally identified with a call on the AAU to strengthen its efforts in this area. The issue of accessibility and affordability also was raised as a concern. For recommendations, the promotion of interdisciplinary approach came up. We need to encourage collaboration across the various disciplines to tackle complex challenges like climate change, like women's empowerment, and the need for us to work closely with male counterparts since we don't exist in society alone. And then also it focused on aspects related to sustainable development to ensure that everything we are doing is contributing to the achievement of the SDG goals. And then maybe let me move quickly. As part of the recommendation as well, the sessions promoted that we need to leverage partnerships for impact. We should not be partnering just for the purposes of partnership, but making sure that it's really having real impact in our communities, real impact in our higher education institutions. And then the sessions also recommended that we need to drive systemic change through policy and practice. I think it was raised that we do have a lot of policy frameworks, currently in existence, but the challenge has been its implementation, the challenges have been its enforcement, and therefore we need to invest more effort in ensuring that practically the policies and the good thought that we have are being implemented. Thank you. I'll end here.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Felix. Next is Mrs. A.G.E.N.D.A.
Thank you very much, and good morning, distinguished guests and participants. I'll be giving you a summary of what transpired during parallel session 3, sub-theme 3, which was on Wednesday, the 23rd of July. So the session was chaired by Dr. Ali Bouabit, who is the program's lead, Institutes of Education and Academic Effectiveness, Academic Initiatives, UM6B, Morocco. The main theme for the session was curricular re-engineering and smooth credit transfer system. And we had 3 speakers out of the 5 that were scheduled to speak. So we had Linda Alejandra Zualoaga Rodriguez, who spoke on the topic Ethics Across the Curriculum, Experiences and Recommendations from a Research University in Latin America. We had Dr. A.G.E.N.D.A Lubin, Subsoil Mineral Resources Management Training Program, and then Professor Mohamed Mubtasim, who spoke on curricular re-engineering for smooth credit transfer in Morocco. Unfortunately, because of time constraints, we just took the presentations. The group could not engage in any discussion because we had to report back here to the plenary to listen to the candidates for the position of AAU president. But we tried to provide here what were the key takeaways for each of the presentations, the notable ideas, and then the practical recommendations. So for the paper on ethics across the curriculum, experiences and recommendations from a research university in Latin America, the key takeaways were that ethical education is key to combating corruption and fostering civic responsibility in Latin America, and probably that could be the same for other parts of the world, including Africa. The University of the Andes has an initiative where they are institutionalizing ethics working through a Center for Applied Ethics and using a cross-disciplinary approach. Another key takeaway was that the initiative is using the TEAC model and the IEHET course to equip faculty, enable them to integrate ethics in their curricula. And the initiative is also working with another organization, Global Ethics, to enhance international collaboration and impact. Notable ideas from the presentation include issues regarding ethical competencies, where there's a focus on critical thinking, civic responsibility, and ethical awareness. Also touching on youth challenges, the need to prepare our students for global citizenship, environmental care, conflict navigation, and care and future accountability. And also issues touching on the need to integrate ethics across all disciplines and not address it as a standalone issue. Then also with regards to communication tools, the need to engage or employ language to foster empathy, collaboration, and ethical engagement. So some of the practical recommendations distilled from the presentations include the need, as already mentioned, the need to embed or integrate ethics across all disciplines, and also to equip faculty with the competencies so they can address the issue of ethics in the design of the curricula and assess ethical learning outcomes. Also, another practical recommendation would be to align ethics with the teaching, research, and community engagement, which are the core, which is the core mandate for every university. And then also to consider partnering with organizations, some other organizations, to scale and diversify impact. And another recommendation is to do with sustainable culture. The need to foster ongoing dialogue, so create platforms for dialoguing on the issue of ethics and integrating it across various disciplines. Our second presentation was on subsoil mineral resources management program, a presentation from our participants from Russia, where they introduced a program they have in place. The key takeaways were that, Africa holds 30% of the world's mineral resources, but sadly, we have a skills shortage of professionals in that sector. So the subsoil program is a specialized program that intends to close this skills gap in mineral resource management. So the Subsoil Africa Consortium, under that same program, a consortium has been set up, which is an initiative between African universities and the Russia's St. Petersburg Mining University. That consortium was set up in 2023, and it's a joint effort between UNESCO and the Russia-Africa Summit. Notable ideas distilled from the presentation include the need to have control over mineral resources because that speaks to or that contributes to our independence and development. Also that the subsoil program is training professionals in strategic management, sustainability, and international legal standards in subsoil use. And also notable is that the program combines theory with practice, where the theory focuses on geology, mining, economics, law, and then there's hands-on training in laboratories and top Russian companies, of course, relevant mining companies. Also to know that the graduates gain skills in strategic planning, project leadership, and business process design. Practical recommendations distilled from the presentation include the need to enroll more students and institutions across Africa in this particular domain. Also, the need to strengthen ties with universities, industry, and Russian partners. Align training with local mineral context and policies, that would be important. Integrate environmental, social, and economic principles for sustainability, and then offering internships, mentorship programs, and job placement pathways. For the third and last presentation for that session, the focus was on curricular re-engineering for smooth credit transfer in Morocco. So aligning exactly with the theme for that session, but giving us a peep into what is going on in Morocco. So for the key takeaways for this particular presentation, it was emphasized that curricular re-engineering is essential or important for enabling smooth credit transfer across Moroccan and international institutions. And this is in alignment with existing policies and the Vision 2030, the LMD process that Morocco has signed on to, the Bologna process as well, with the objective of enhancing employability, mobility, and internationalization. The presentation also emphasized a shift from content-based to outcome-based education using or based on Bloom's taxonomy. Notable ideas from this presentation included competency-based design, the need to define clear learning outcomes for every program, for every module, being learner-centered, using learner-centered approaches, using active, flexible, and personal learning methods. Also, finding other means of assessing students' performance, applying portfolios, using peer reviews, and digital badges. Then the need to integrate technology using the LMS platforms, blockchain for credit transfer, and visual student exchanges. Practical recommendations for this paper relate to auditing of curricula, so we can identify gaps in learning outcomes, engaging with stakeholders, students, and international partners, training faculty on outcome-based education, competency-based approaches and digital tools, and of course, testing with partner universities, testing the pilot credit transfers. And then again, ensuring quality assurance so that these processes align with whatever policies and systems have been put in place at the national level with regards to quality and qualification. Also, recommendations relating to investing in faculty development and adopting agile, tech-enhanced curricula. And then lastly, but not the least, strengthening global partnerships, which would be important in every endeavor. It's always good to walk the road with someone else. Key challenges raised with regards to the three presentations related to systemic issues, skills and capacity gaps, curriculum management, institutional barriers, technology and infrastructure, internationalization, and quality assurance. So there's quite a bit of information provided there. I'll just mention a few with regards to each of the presentations. So for ethics across curriculum, challenges to do with limited faculty training in ethics, also the lack of spaces for dialogue on ethical issues with regards to higher education, language and cultural barriers. With regards to the subsoil program that was presented by the group from Russia, a few challenges noted is the lack of national control over mineral resources, the shortage of skilled professionals, and reliance on or dependence on foreign expertise. For curricular re-engineering, the Moroccan case study, a few challenges raised related to fragmented credit systems, faculty unprepared for outcome-based education, curricula not being aligned with labor markets, lack of credit transfer standardization. Innovative approaches identified in the three presentations as presented on the screen. With regards to ethics across the curriculum, multilingual strategies for inclusive engagement is one innovative approach. For the subsol presentation, a hybrid curriculum that emphasizes both theory and practice was one innovation. Strategic focus on resource sovereignty, also an innovative approach. And then for curricular re-engineering, the case of Morocco, the innovative approaches identified or distilled from the presentation included the outcome-based education using Bloom's taxonomy and micro-credentials and digital badges as means of assessing students' performance. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. A.G.E.N.D.A. Our last rapporteur is Mr. Frank Asefua.
Morning, distinguished executives. I was just told we're running out of time, so I'll be really rough on you with the speed at which I would go through the sessions and how they fared. We'll be talking about 3 sessions, which is section 3D, 3C, and 4C. So 4C covered funding, infrastructural development in higher education institutions, and was chaired by Professor Paul Omaji. The 3D also covered indigenous knowledge and preservation of the environment through culture, which was also chaired by Prof. Idris Arai. And 4C covered leveraging the academic diaspora for research and innovation in African universities, and was chaired by Professor Tawana Kupe. So in the first session regarding funding, it was important that funding needs to be increased because higher education institutions need infrastructure in order to be able to develop effectively. Hence, there were a lot of discussions regarding what could be done and how that could be improved. And there were suggestions made that funding could come out from loans on making the most of existing buildings and using technology in order to make smart choices that would be beneficial for the institution for their return on investments. There was also the highlights from that session was also that cutting costs too much in order cutting costs too much could hurt the university because there are some things that do not have a significant return on investment but holds value for the institution. So they still need to be maintained even though they might be taking a lot of money. It was also recognized that it was important for the universities to keep a steady income that will aid them to be able to move forward. They also needed to set clear goals which would aid them in order to raise money. And then fundraising was not just a group's effort, but the entire institution. So there needs to be an institutional outlook on how they could raise money in order to be able to support the institutions. For section 3D, which talked about indigenous knowledge and preservation of the environment through culture, we had 2 major areas that were discussed regarding how Zimbabwe was shifting medical training to include TCAM, which is traditional, complementary, and alternate medicine in their curriculum. And it was also important that they used indigenous knowledge to solve problems that they were having nationally. And then while doing so, they needed to make sure that it aligned with global health goals as well. The other presentation emphasized the need for a reconnection of urban and educational planning, focusing on indigenous and community-based knowledge systems. There was also the highlight that there needs to be a governance that is participatory, sensitive to ecological changes, and rooted deeply in the culture of their nation or the institution. And one of the key highlights was that Great Zimbabwe University has been able to embed 20% of TCAM into its curriculum for medicine. So every student that goes in there, there is a 20% of the curriculum that is dedicated entirely to traditional medicine. There was also discussions regarding how to emphasize governance that is participatory to make sure that they are ecologically aware and make or create curriculum that is culturally relevant to suit the institution. 4C talked about how diaspora can be leveraged in order to be able to improve research and innovation in African universities. There were 2 presenters in that session, and the major themes was that there is a very low literacy level on the continent, and this inhibits the ability of the continent to grow exponentially and to be able to attain to goals such as those that are set in the Agenda 2063. There was a need in the discussions that they recommended that there needs to be a bridge between African universities, the diaspora, and industry in order to be able to scale up the activities that are done, make sure that the graduates that are churned out are employable, and make sure that with the integration with the industry, it's a seamless for a graduate to be able to enter the job market. The emerging themes in these 3 various sessions was that there needs to be digital transformation in institutions, especially with regard to the finance section, and then there needs to be a brainstorming of the entire institution to make sure that everybody brings their ideas on board so that decisions could be made that are pivotal to aid the institution. We also recognize that there is an increase in biotech startups across the continent, and hence there was a need to look at the traditional medicine that we already do and how they could be integrated into these startups. There was also the discussion on how to collaborate between diaspora, academia on the continent, and industry in order to make sure that we are meeting our goals. The emerging trends in the presentations was that there's a lot of land, usually, that universities have. There needs to be a discussion and then a way to make full use of all the spaces in order to rake in more income for the institution to be able to attain their goals. And also, there is a new approach that was seen, that a lot of partnerships with industries, where industries build infrastructure, they run it, and then they hand it over to the university. And it could be an approach that universities could also emulate in order to aid the growth of infrastructure on their campuses. It was also mentioned that community involvement is stronger and more students are launching biotech and herbal product startups, so there needs to be an approach in order to be able to aid this. The third point was also that research centers are being set up that would link universities with scholars outside the continent, and in order to be able to tackle the issues that we have locally. So it is important that the diaspora and the researchers on the continent continue to work together. The key challenges raised was the discussions regarding the KPIs for universities and how that can be used to measure success and how that could bring them long-term improvements. There was a challenge of heavy reliance on imported pharmaceutical drugs, and that really undermines the local health autonomy that is on the continent. Also, there needs to be, there was a challenge with cooperation among institutions on the continent. Even though we are one continent, there are so many linguistic barriers that we have, so it makes it very difficult for academics on the continent to be able to communicate. And this was one of the major challenges that was raised. There are quite a few recommendations, so I'll just summarize them for you. There is a need for finance teams to be kept abreast with up-to-date knowledge, which would help them to be able to see emerging funding opportunities and to be able to foster strategic partnerships that could enhance the mobilization of resources for their institutions. There was also a need for national guidelines to be created for traditional medicine, in collaboration with the World Health Organization guidelines to make sure that it aligns with the local health practices and the community needs of the nation as well. It was also discussed that there's a need for enhancing global visibility and the recognition of Africa's intellectual achievements by leveraging on international platforms and strengthening engagement with diaspora scholars and institutions. Thank you very much, and I'm sure the presentations will be shared with you so you can have a deep dive in this. Thank you.
Yeah, colleagues, those are 4 reports from discussion on conference sub-themes and parallel sessions. Our next step for the remaining few minutes will be for comments, if there are any comments, please. If there are any comments, additions, subtractions. If there are no comments, then let me allow my colleagues to leave the platform. Thank you. Oh, wait a moment.
Just to mention that the rapporteurs and the rapporteur general will help us to compile all this report into a booklet that must be published. So your work is not complete yet. I want to thank you very much, all of you who have reported all the sessions. The chair, we appreciate you. Thank you very much.